in fear. You got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You got to be carefully taught.
Do you have the courage to love someone?
Hello and welcome back to A Seat at the Table with Race Together. We're going to continue that conversation about woke and consciousness. And today we're going to start off with Nina. Nina, can you give a little bit of the background origins about consciousness?
Yeah, so consciousness. I don't know if anybody has heard of Karl Marx, and he's a German philosopher. And he basically, I guess people call him the father of communism. And that we will get into that later. Mm-hmm. But the origins of consciousness, Karl Marx wrote a piece on what it means to be conscious. And basically what he was saying is that when we grow up, like when our parents decide to like reproduce and they have us, they condition us to the society that we're living in. So they never, and it's not because they're intentionally doing it, it's because themselves they're conditioned as well. So they'll condition you the way they were conditioned. So you're in this cycle of a thought process and you don't break it, and then you're living under a government or in a society that is basically like enslaved through the mind. And so you don't question the things around you because you think that that's how things are supposed to be, or that things are not going to change. So then consciousness comes in when you break out from that, and then you realize that there's a power structure that's keeping you in that cycle. And then you realize that this cycle starts from when you are a child because the people before you couldn't break the cycle. So I guess one thing that he really hits on is that it is possible to break the cycle. And then that's where you have activists like Angela Davis and, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, where they broke the cycle and they're thinking outside of this reoccurring theme. So, and then you want to take that.
So then from that we get double consciousness, which is coined by W.E. Du Bois. And double consciousness is sort of like taking that, think about what we've already discussed about intersectionality, that experience that you have beyond just your dominant group. So in Du Bois's case, he was a black man, so he was thinking about the way that he views the world as a man, and then the way that he views the world as a black man. And that double consciousness is like that heightened awareness of you're almost living two lives at once, and you're keenly aware of two different views of the world.
That was nice.
Nice. So, because of that double consciousness, I think that maybe we should touch on a little bit about privileges, because a lot of people, for some reason, think that, they don't have privileges as a person of the black community. And I'm like, but you're able-bodied. You may or may not be whatever sexual orientation that may give you some sort of privilege. We're not completely victimized in this world. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I think to talk about privilege, we have to tell people that it's not that it's okay, but it's okay. Because when people find out they have privilege, it's like, well, no, and then they go on the defense, which is why they're like, well, I'm black, so I can't be privileged. Yeah. Or, you might have a white person that says, I can't be privileged because, I live in the Midwest, so I am not rich. So what privilege are you telling me that I have? So I think we need to, before we go into like what privileges are, we need to like let people know it's okay for you to be privileged, because that is how the system works.
Yes.
And then once we have that, then we can start breaking down those intersectional ideas. Or identities, I should say.
Yes. Explain it.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to talk about privileges. The 6 things that are outlined when you read about intersectionality are being a rich, white, able-bodied, cisgendered, heterosexual male.
Hold on, wait.
Repeat that. Rich, white, able-bodied.
She said.
Okay. Able-bodied.
Cisgendered.
Cisgendered.
Heterosexual.
Let's see.
And male.
Yeah, that is a C.
So
By the way, cis is spelled CIS.
Not cis.
Cis.
This, no.
No. Okay.
So any of those that you are not, that's one of your things that you are not privileged with.
Probably can't see it, but we'll post it online.
And so any of
Oh, he
those.
coming for the Zoom. He coming for the Zoom.
Put the E after male.
No, but
We'll edit that.
Zooming. Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
And any of those things that you are, that's where your privilege lies, and that's when you have the ability to help others who do not have that.
Exactly.
And we're not trying to attack you,
No.
cis,
Okay.
rich, white males.
No.
If you
No,
check
you have
all
the
the
most ability
boxes,
to help all
you
of
are
us.
still okay.
Yeah.
You are a decent human being.
Don't take offense.
Right. I think I just lost my train of thought. With those identities, there we go. I mentioned before in an earlier episode, Oppression Olympics. People tend to play the Oppression Olympics, which is basically when one group or two groups of people fight over who is more oppressed than who, without realizing that we all have these different privileges that could elevate us over another group. So a black person can be a male, can be cisgendered, can be straight or heterosexual, because that's a problematic term.
Yes.
And you're discussing something with a gay, white, cisgendered male, you, by definition, that black person has more privilege because they are heterosexual. So in society, being heterosexual is okay. So therefore, you have that privilege. Now, that gay, cis, white male
Has
privilege over you in a racial aspect. So it's constant. It's like a seesaw. It does this depending on where we are and what the conversation is. Somebody in that conversation will be more oppressed than the next person. Do we have people that are empty on all of those lists? So they're not rich, they're not white, they're not able-bodied, they're not cis, they're not hetero, and they're not male.
And
yes,
do.
they exist.
They do.
So they exist, but in most conversations, everybody is not checking, not checking most of those boxes.
Yeah.
So when we have that conversation, it tends to just be, a circle where it's like, oh my God, I'm more oppressed. No, I'm more oppressed. No, I'm more oppressed.
Yeah.
No.
And it really shouldn't be, but I think that leads us to they. Because they.
I should say they.
You know how DJ Khaled's like, they don't want us to have nothing.
Yeah.
They didn't want me to buy this car. They didn't want me to have an opportunity.
But I did.
But I did it though.
It's
way the best.
Yes, but he's not even lying. Like there is a they out there, and they are actively trying to dissemble people who rise above these things that we're talking about. Would you guys like to elaborate on your experiences with they, or who you would like to identify as they? Because it's such an abstract label.
But the thing is that when we say they could actually be invisible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because sometimes when we say they, we could even be talking about something that's systemic and institutional.
Yeah.
Right.
But who handles the system and the institution is the they.
I feel like it's the new way of saying the man, because remember that was popular. It's the man. The man is holding me down. They're like, who is the man? It's just the man. Like,
so
they is just they.
Another thing that I think about when I hear they is the term the invisible hand. But sometimes they could be very visible. That's another thing.
Yeah, I'll tell you who's visible. Betsy DeVos.
And
the Koch brothers, Donald Trump. Those are visible days.
She coming for
those are days. And then when you want to talk about systemic racism, institutional racism, that's also they. There's just they hold the power. That's where I'm trying to get at. So
they equals power. That's literally it. They equals power.
They is equivalent to power. And then
But
another
as a
thing,
person, you're not powerless.
yes, exactly. I think another thing that we would have to do is even flip the coin and then talk about the them, because they refer to everybody else as them. Those people, that group.
Okay, girl.
You people.
Okay, come on.
Yeah, so
Come on.
Once you heard somebody drop you people, you know you messing with they.
Yep,
Yes,
exactly.
yes,
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And I think it's really important to realize that even if they're from a unprivileged group,
You
they
can
can't.
still be
You
they.
can stay. You can still be they. Like you, it's not impossible.
Goes back to privilege.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You know, like I've had people of color look at me and say, "Your people," and then I'm like, "Whoa!" Like that's really strong.
That's how you feel? Okay.
Yeah. And it's like, well, I have to like take a step back, and then I'm like, "You're they," and like you know, like you have that realization, and or sometimes literally it could be like bigotry coming from a white person, and that also could be they. I think the trick here,
And unconscious bigotry.
exactly,
Yeah.
unconscious bigotry. I think another thing is I want to highlight before I even like go further with this is that anti-racism does not mean anti-white. That's something that I really want to hit on because you have to be, the goal is to be anti-racist, not anti-white. That is not the goal. If you are anti-white,
you yourself are problematic.
yeah, you are part of the problem. Because that's not the goal at all. If you're anti-white, you're not achieving anything. You're just helping.
Yeah.
If you're anti-white, please go sit in the corner.
And
Yeah,
we're
no.
not anti-rich, we're not anti-able-bodied, we're not anti-cisgender, we're not anti-heterosexual. We're just anti-abuse
Don't
of
forget male.
privilege
People will take the
and
anti-male.
anti-male.
Yeah.
People will be like,
Yeah.
oh, she left this one out.
Well, I've already been called emasculating, so I mean, but for what? Because I spoke up for everybody else.
Just because it's
I think the process of they and them, none of being a rich, white, able-bodied, cisgendered, heterosexual male is natural,
That's a
and
lot.
it's just as a lot, and it's just as natural as being none of them.
Yes.
The only difference that it makes is that one of them has more power, which makes them able to other those who are not any of those things.
I think we also should start saying dominant group
Yes.
instead of
Okay.
power, because I think that puts a little bit more
Yes.
understanding of this power dynamic, because we're not saying people are powerless, it's
Exactly.
just you are not the dominant of
Yeah.
what society accepts, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think another thing is that when we talk about these things, we always just keep in mind that we always have to go back to colonization and imperialism, because this is where these things stem from.
Right.
And like Angela Davis said when she recently
And
visited
capitalism.
exactly, in capitalism, when she recently visited campus, she said, when we talk about the injustices of today, we have to always go back to colonization and imperialism.
Right.
You cannot talk about the things going on right now and not go back to that. And I think that, like, as people, because I'm even a victim of it, like, we completely want to ignore that part of history and say, no, but this is happening right now. Like, this hasn't stemmed from anywhere else. Like, it just came out of nowhere. No, it's been over 200 years of a process. It's been over 300 years of a process.
It's been
thousand-year process. This didn't just come out of the blue.
If it had come out of the blue, it would have been so much easier to break down.
Because we'd have been like, that's not right.
Exactly. We have built on this for 1,000 years.
But
and just had
how
to tear it
how
down.
has it gone on for thousands of years?
Complacency.
Hello.
I knew where she was going with this. I'm excited.
And with complacency, what does that mean? Who is complacent? Who
Everybody.
can- Exactly.
Everybody is complacent
Yes. It doesn't-
without realizing.
Yeah.
It.
It
It's
doesn't
literally
matter.
just being not knowing, not being conscious that you are oppressing somebody else, or you may be ignoring the fact that somebody else is being oppressed. That's how I'll explain complacency.
Yes.
Yes. I also think that assimilation is a form of complacency. When, I could only speak, from my end, like, when people leave their homeland and they go anywhere, not only the United States, but then they completely forget where they come from. That's a form of complacency. Or they completely want to embrace, like, I could, like, give an example, with Charlottesville. I think Michael Ramos. He was there participating with the white supremacists, And he then goes and says, I'm of Puerto Rican descent.
Oh, wow.
And then everybody's like,
What did you do?
yeah, exactly. And it's like, exactly, that's the reaction. And
Add
you're like,
value to your racism.
exactly. And it's like, but that's complacency when you help the system. But then again, it goes, you try to, like, when you get caught, it's like, wait, but, like, no, like,
I'm oppressed.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's the same thing of, like, saying, I have a black friend. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. Or
I hate when people throw out there, I'm black, so I can't appropriate culture. And it's like, you too
Can do this.
You too.
Yeah.
I think also complacency, because we keep applying it to race, but I think that's just because, like, that's the first thing that always comes to mind. But complacency can be the other things. So we're talking about cisgender. We're talking about, being gay, lesbian, trans. There is women. There's the, rich, poor dynamic. You can be complacent in all of those.
Yes.
And they would just be substituting what we just basically said about race
Yeah.
with anything derogatory
Completely agree.
or oppressive too.
So I think.
No, go ahead.
You got it.
I don't think complacency also doesn't always have to be a, I won't say malicious, but a negative thing. I think in history and some even now it's part of survival.
Yeah.
Not everyone can afford to step out and speak out when they see something that is going wrong, because maybe they, what's prevalent today, maybe they're not legally here or undocumented. Maybe they're not, and they step out against something wrong that they see, they can be hurt. Even as far as assimilation wise, if you can blend into the dominant society and survive for your family, survive for if you have children, or if just for yourself, then there's a necessary need to do that. It doesn't always have to be a malicious thing. And I think in the past, I think that's why it's continued for so long, because the power dynamic was a lot different than it is now. Now it's slowly shifting a bit more, working on it. But because of the power dynamic, it was a need to be complacent. There's a need to assimilate. There's a need to blend in with the most you can do without hurting yourself.
Yeah.
I think an artist who touches upon the topic of complacency so well is my boy Hove.
I'm dead.
She's OJ story. I think all of the lyrics to the music video and even the way he performs it in concert, I think is just like so embodying of like trying to hold up a mirror to what people's complacency is, because OJ Simpson was a complacent man.
Most black celebrities are complacent. Most white celebrities I feel like it just again talks. What labels are we talking about? What identities are we talking about?
Yeah.
If we're talking about race, then yeah, he's an example of that.
But I don't think you just have to be looking at a racial point of view OJ as well. I feel like there's an OJ of every group and every oppressed dynamic. I think there lies an OJ.
What is the? I feel like I agree.
I feel
but
like
what is?
I
I
would
need
say
the example because
I
I can't picture that.
Somebody who assimilates, somebody who puts blinders on and ignores, and somebody who points down at this is why you're in this situation.
Yeah.
It's your fault. It's you.
So the women who are like, this is y'all's fault for
Yes.
the hashtag Me Too Times Up movement. My pen has left me. Or let's see.
I think another,
I don't know how that applies to LGBTQ or cis or trans.
It's your choice. You have a choice whether to be part of the community or not.
Okay.
That's where I see it's like, or you're confused, whatever. I think those are forms when you constantly point at somebody and say, you're not like that. Like, you don't have to be like that.
Or a good example of the LGBTQ, what happened with Grownish, spoiler coming, with the bisexual girl who couldn't date the bisexual man.
Oh, yes. That makes
I think
sense.
that's an OJ moment.
Yeah.
And also with masculine gay men giving hate towards feminine gay men.
Yes.
That's the OJ
Yes.
situation.
Yes.
Okay. Now it's coming together. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes. So we're going to touch upon more OJ-like symptoms in the next episode. Thank you for tuning in.